Chinese army of the mid-19th century was in serious decline. Its decay a reflection of the Qing dynasty that produced it. The Qing originally sprang from the Jurchen peoples, hard-riding tribesmen who occupied the territory north of Korea. In the 17th century, Nurhaci of the Anson Gyaro clan united the Jurchen tribes under his leadership. He created military units called banners, each distinguished by a colored flag. Eventually there were 8 banners, the list including bordered yellow, plain white, bordered white, plain red, bordered blue, and plain blue. Eventually the Jurchen tribes became known as the Manchu, and their territory Manchuria. Nurhaci laid the foundation of Manchu greatness, but it was his sons Abahe and Dorzan who really created the Qing dynasty. The Manchu army became multi-ethnic, welcoming Mongols and Chinese into its ranks. In time, 8 banners of Chinese and 8 banners of Mongols were formed, joining the original Manchu formations for a total of 24 banners. Eventually, these bannermen had both military and civic functions. Although there were 24 banner units, in fact, officially they were always just the 8 banners. After the Manchus took over China in 1644 and placed their Qing dynasty on the Dragon Throne, the pre-existing Chinese army was reorganized with the title the Green Banner. The Green Banner became a kind of national police force. One estimate places the 19th century strength of the bannermen at 200,000, the Green Banner at 500,000. These figures are inflated, because corrupt officials created fictional troops to pocket army funds. China had once led the world in military technology, inventing gunpowder and the crossbow in the Middle Ages. But although the Chinese army may have had 800,000 men, sheer numbers alone could not disguise the internal rot, a deep malaise caused by the chronic failure to modernize. The Qing emperors, like Chinese society at large, had become intensely Sinocentric, so focused on the greatness of China they failed to recognize the technological developments in Europe and America. By 1860 the army was hopelessly out of date, its men armed with 17th century or even medieval weapons. Some Chinese soldiers carried matchlocks or jingles, the latter a curious weapon that seemed half musket, half handheld artillery. The jingle had a 1.5-inch caliber and fired balls from 4 ounces to a pound. They were so cumbersome that to be fired they had to be propped on a wall, or even another man's shoulder. Other Chinese troops were equipped with swords, crossbows, bows and arrows, spears, and a curious kind of polearm that looked like a trident. By contrast, the red-coated British infantryman had as his standard weapon the 1853 percussion and field-rifled musket, sighted to 1,200 yards. The 1860 conflict was the 3rd time the Chinese had fought the British. The First China War, also called the Opium War, took place from 1839 to 1842. The Second China War was fought largely from 1857 to 1858. By 1860 the Qing had had 20 years to see the handwriting on the wall, yet they failed to act. In 1860 bannermen were a magnificent anachronism, their dress and weaponry scarcely changed for over 200 years. A British eyewitness recalled, the Tartars probably bannermen were dressed in the ordinary Chinese black hat of silk, and had 2 squirrels' tails projecting from their hat behind. They had on light-colored jackets over a long undergarment of darker material, and blue trousers tucked into long Tartar boots. They rode in short stirrups, and were mounted on stout hardy working ponies. The bannermen were superb horsemen, performing dazzling feats of equestrianship with grace and ease. Matchlock-wielding horsemen could fire and reload their pieces, and Bowman discharge a hail of arrows, all while riding at full gallop. The typical Chinese foot soldier wore a sleeveless surcoat over a loose smock. The surcoat had a circle on the front and back that gave his unit a character that meant courage or bravery. In this period, Chinese men adopted the Manchu custom of shaving the forehead but having a long braided queue or pigtail behind. Chinese or Manchu officers were distinguished by bamboo hats topped by a decorative fringe of reed hair on top. The Navy expects that new weapons and sensors will better enable the ship to destroy swarming small boat attacks, support carrier strike groups, conduct disaggregated operations, attack enemies with an over-the-horizon missile, and engage in advanced surface and anti-submarine warfare. The Navy envisions a new multi-mission guided missile frigate able to sense enemy targets from great distances, fire next-generation precision weaponry, utilize new networking and ISR technologies, operate unmanned systems, and succeed against technically advanced enemies in open or blue water combat, according to service statements. Over the last several years, the service has been refining and analyzing design, sensor and weapons concepts for the new ship, called the FFGX. The Navy hopes to expedite development and ultimately deploy the new ship in the early to mid-2020s. Service developers seem to be heavily emphasizing sensor networking, weapons integration, and targeting technology as it navigates this next phase of development. The Navy expects that new weapons and sensors will better enable the ship to destroy swarming small boat attacks, support carrier strike groups, conduct disaggregated operations, attack enemies with an over-the-horizon missile, and engage in advanced surface and anti-submarine warfare, service statements specify. The FFGX, Small Surface Combatant, will expand Blue Force sensor and weapon influence to provide increased information to the overall fleet tactical picture while challenging adversary intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, and tracking (ISR&T) efforts, Naval Sea Systems Command FFGX documents said. The Blue Force sensor language is explained by Navy developers as integral to the Navy's distributed maritime operations concept, which, as evidenced by its name, seeks to enable a more dispersed and networked attack fleet suited for disaggregated operations as needed. Also, by extension, longer-range sensors will be needed to identify enemy attackers now equipped with long-range precision strike weapons and enable command and control across vast distances of open water and coastal patrol areas. The Navy vision for the ship further specifies this, saying the FFGX will be capable of establishing a local sensor network using passive onboard sensors, embarked aircraft, and elevated tethered systems in unmanned vehicles to gather information and then act as a gateway to the fleet tactical grid using resilient communication systems and networks. With networked weapons in mind, the Navy has expressed a need for a netted sensor technology called Cooperative Engagement Capability. CECSAC is an integral aspect of key emerging ship defense technologies aimed at netting sensors and radar technologies in order to better identify and destroy approaching threats such as anti-ship missiles, drones, and enemy aircraft. SEC is a sensor netting system that significantly improves battle force anti-air warfare capability by extracting and distributing sensor-derived information such that the superset of this data is available to all participating SEC units. A Raytheon statement said current analysis is no longer restricted to the idea of loosely basing the hull design upon the LCS, as was previously the case, Navy officials say.